This weekend, we approach a Jewish holiday that is sometimes marked in communities and sometimes not. It's especially marked in the Jewish summer camp world. Does anyone know the holiday? Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av starts tomorrow night, and it's been a holiday that has had every tragedy that's occurred to the Jewish people heaped onto it. It commemorates the destruction of not one, but two of the Jerusalem temples. It commemorates umpteen million massacres during the Middle Ages and so on. And the question often arises in a religion that believes in a good and loving God, how such a thing could happen, how so many negative things could happen to the Jewish people. The Talmud, fortunately, offers us with an answer. It's not a very satisfying answer, but it's an answer, so I'm going to share it with you tonight. The story that we Jews have traditionally told ourselves about the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, year 70, is not a story about politics or armies, but it's a story that starts with a dinner party. There's a man who plans a banquet, and he tells his servant to invite his friend Kamsa to the banquet, but the servant makes a mistake. You've all misfired an email to someone. Well, he brought the letter to the wrong person. He brings it to Bar Kamsa, the sworn enemy of the man who was holding the dinner party. Similar names, easy enough mistake. Bar Kamsa, thinking that fences have been mended, shows up to the dinner party. And when the host sees him, he flies into a rage and he tells him to get out. Leave the party. Bar Kamsa tries to save face and to smooth ruffled feathers by offering to pay for his meal and eventually for the whole party, and the host says, no, absolutely not, get out. There were in the room people of standing and virtue who could have said something, but they didn't do anything. They didn't intercede for the man who was being thrown out of the party. And that silence contributed, our Talmud teaches us, to the fall of Jerusalem. And if you say to yourself, why could such a small affront at a dinner party lead to such a large change in the politics of an area, I bring you back to something that happened in 2011 at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Few of you remember this. President at the time, Barack Obama, took stage, and Donald Trump, then a celebrity businessman, was in the audience. And Trump was mocked by Obama because Trump had been attacking President Obama about his birth certificate. And anyway, it was a back and forth. It was a mocking of then candidate Trump by then President Obama. Trump was apparently unhappy about this, and it's debated whether he stayed or left during the speech. But what's not debated is that many close to this event say that something shifted inside Donald Trump that night, and it's the catalyst that caused him to run for office. It wasn't the jokes exactly, it was the idea of being humiliated in public by someone. The laughter. The people in the room who could have spoken up and said, hey, that's a little much. It didn't cause what happened next in our country, but it helped shape it, and it was part of an ongoing continuum of increasing rhetoric and mocking that has led America to be a much meaner and less happy place than it was when I was a kid. So sometimes it's not a pistol shot to an archduke that starts a war, it's a dinner party. In the Talmud, Bar Kamsa is absolutely livid. He decides to retaliate, and so he goes to the Roman emperor. Next slide. There's a debate about who it was at the time, which emperor it's supposed to be. The Talmud's never exactly perfect about dates, but he goes to the emperor and he says to the emperor, the Jews are going to rebel against you. They claim to love you, but they hate you, and so on. And he offers the emperor an animal to sacrifice in the temple in Jerusalem. And according to the story, if the priests in the temple accept the animal, it will be seen that the Jews are good, willing citizens of Rome. You pay your taxes to the Roman emperor and you practice your religion, and the religion pays tribute to the emperor in different ways too. But according to Torah law, and apparently the law in the temple, only ritually pure animals were allowed to be sacrificed in the temple. They had to have no blemishes. So just about as Bar Kamsa is handing this animal over to the Roman emperor, who does not realize that this very nice-looking goat here has to be without blemish, Bar Kamsa takes out a knife and he makes a little incision on the face of the, usually it's said that's the lip of the goat. Not enough for a Roman to care, but enough to render it unfit for sacrifice in the temple. So it's brought to the temple by the emissaries of the emperor, and the rabbis and the priests in the temple are in a bind. If they offer the blemished animal, they'll have violated the rules. They'll have violated Torah law. But if they reject the animal, they risk appearing disloyal to the emperor. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus insists that they do nothing, that they not offer the animal. Because if they offer the animal, people will think they've relaxed their standards. They were quite dogmatic, and the idea of making any accommodation for the other side of any kind was completely unacceptable. However, he refuses to allow Bar Kamsa to be denounced to the emperor, because that would be betraying a landsman, betraying another Jew to the Roman authorities. And people will think that it's appropriate to be executed for just causing injury to an animal among the Jews, because the Romans, like I said, had no similar law. And so the opportunity to prevent a disaster slips away. Rabbi Yochanan in the Talmud, speaking sometime later, says that it was because of this excessive humility on the part of Rabbi Zechariah that the temple was destroyed. The sanctuary was burned, and we were exiled from our land. What does he mean by excessive humility? It's not modesty he's talking about. It's not certainly piety. It's a kind of paralysis, a refusal to take moral responsibility and to act decisively when human dignity and safety are on the line. We don't need to look very far to see how relevant this is. Our country is incredibly deeply divided. Red and blue and urban and rural and religious and secular, and the fractures are not healing. And like the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, this crisis did not begin with armies. It began by slowly increasing insults, with humiliations and with silence in the face of cruelty. And now we see what happens in a world of tit-for-tat reprisals. Just recently, one of the greatest critics of now President Trump, Stephen Colbert, was canceled. Colbert, for many years, was a liberal, educated voice. He was witty, he was sarcastic, and he was always quick to mock what he saw as the other side. But something is shifting in our country. That mocking is becoming so dangerous that it can get you pulled from television. And for those of you who did not see the news about the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, they lost their funding and have declared that they will cease to exist. The Talmud reminds us the temple didn't fall when the Romans arrived, when the catastrophe happened, when the city was invaded, when the Temple Mount was invaded. The cracks in the society, the fissures, had been widening for some time. It was a society broken into rival parties that did not understand each other, did not speak in the same value system, and were willing to stab each other. There was a group called the Sicarii, their name for the little knives they would carry around and stab people in the street. So as Tisha B'Av approaches, we should pay attention to this warning from our Talmud. Destruction doesn't only come from the outside, from invading armies. It begins when we allow indignity to fester, when we cheer on people in our society who are brutally making fun of and cruelly mocking someone else. It begins when we choose silence over justice and when we laugh instead of listen. So what do? We speak up when it's easier to stay quiet. We interrupt when we see someone being humiliated. We challenge our leaders who confuse legal caution and moral cowardice. And we remember that sometimes that the very most dangerous thing we can do is nothing at all. So whether or not you're marking Tisha B'Av with fasting and with sitting on low chairs, or whether you're marking it with a ham sandwich, mark it with honesty. Let's ask ourselves the sort of future we're building and what we'd be willing to risk our lives to protect. This may not be the time of collapse, but it could be the time to turn back towards civility. Shabbat Shalom.